Welcome everyone to another episode of Facility Management Marketing Podcast. I'm your host Javier. And so this next episode what I'm going to be diving into is, let me look at my notes over here, kind of fix this mic really quick. This next episode that I'm going to be diving into really quick is going to be 4 marketing strategies that are going to help your business, help your facility or property management company essentially be successful. And so these 4 marketing strategies all kind of have their own, it's kind of like a overarching strategy for each one. And then from there, there are tactical, there's different pieces of tactics that go within those strategies in themselves. And so I'm going to dive into each one of these, and I'm going to kind of give examples of how you can actually implement this into your own business. And then I'm going to give examples on kind of what I'm currently doing right now at Ratmate, so you guys have an idea of kind of like how this is kind of all working and how this all works. If you see this video, because I'll eventually probably put these videos out, I'm wrapped up, bundled up in a Cowboys blanket. Yes, I am a Dallas Cowboys fan. If that turns you off as a listener, then so be it. But if you don't really care and you're all about the content, then great. Okay, so anyways, what I want to do is dive into these 4 marketing strategies that are really critical, in my opinion, to help essentially, you can use each of these strategies as like one strategy, and that's all you do for an entire quarter, and it can really change your business. Or you can use like, hey, we're going to use this one strategy and take one tactic and use this as part of our business growth for the next quarter. So like example would be like these 4 strategies, you can take essentially all 4 and implement all 4 and just use one tactic for each one to do it. Okay, so there's different levels of it. You can get very granular and get very deep into one, while the other is going to be a little bit more like you can just focus on 1 or 2 and be like, this is all we're doing for this entire quarter is these 2 pieces and that's it. And then there's like 3 or 4 tactics to help kind of drive that. And so I use a combination of these different strategies to help with, I guess the better way of putting it is to help with our marketing goals, to help with not just the direction of our marketing strategy that we've overarching strategy, but this also helps us kind of like say, hey, this is what marketing has brought in, and by us focusing on this, and this, we've been able to generate these many leads, or we've been able to generate this much business, or this is how much pipeline was created, etc. And so each of these strategies, they're, like I said, they can be run on their own, or they can be all kind of like working together for like a common goal. End of the day, I'm going to say this again, I'm going to always say this, is you as a marketing leader should always be finding ways to tie yourself to revenue as much as possible. So all actions that you do should be tied to revenue. And you might be wondering like, well, like some of them take longer for revenue to be kind of seen, and I totally agree. And so that's where you're going to have to like then sell to your CEO or to the CFO who might give you your budget and just say, hey, listen, we're focusing on this for 2 quarters. We're not anticipating to see any kind of ROI for like a quarter and a half. And then by like month 6 or month 5, we start seeing some traction. And then that's, and you give examples and stuff like that. All right. So the first one I'm going to dive into is called demand generation. So demand gen is kind of like what we say in the marketing world for a little bit shorter term. Demand gen is everything that is done to essentially create demand. So the best way I can explain this is that a lot of companies are using this as it's like a play on where it's not just search engine stuff, but like where people just know about you and you're creating the demand. Okay. And so I'll talk about the next one as well too, which will just kind of like be the opposite of this one. So demand generation is where you create demand, where people are like, oh, I've heard of you, or I know who you are, or I've heard a podcast, or I saw a LinkedIn post, or I did a Google search, or I read a blog. Like it's those things. And when you are doing demand generation, it's very strategic with a long-term play, but then you're capturing that demand based off of what you're putting out there. And some people kind of use like demand gen as like very, very top of funnel kind of, or it could be used like middle of funnel, where you might run some ads or whatever, and then they kind of see some stuff and they leave, and then what you do is you provide more content to kind of educate them more about whatever you have as far as your services that you're offering. So the way I like to classify demand generation is it's going to be something that you have put out content, and your ideal customer profile, your ICP, has somehow consumed that content, and they're piqued, they're interested, they're like, interesting, I want some more details. And then they either call your team or they schedule a demo or something along those lines. And so demand gen can be done in so many different ways. You could do like a very SEO focused demand gen where all you're doing is putting out very like SEO heavy content, okay? Meaning like you're doing a lot of blogs and you're doing landing pages, and you kind of create this what's the right term, like almost like this cluster, that's the term, this cluster approach or a pyramid approach, where you have like one heavy piece of content that is very like rich, like 2, 3, 4, 5,000 words, and you're like, that many words? Yes. Very rich, very heavy, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 words. And this content essentially is like it could be like a very strong piece where it has almost everything. So example of if you're a facility management company, you might, and you offer commercial HVAC, let's just use that as an example, then you might be talking about everything about commercial HVAC, everything from like managing RTUs to like, I'm forgetting some of the units, like to like split systems, to just like different types of things. And you're talking about this, and it's just very content rich, where you're explaining everything and how to, do preventative maintenance and how to do all of this stuff. And it's like 3,000, 4,000 words. And then what you do is then you write blogs to support all of that stuff. So maybe you have a smaller blog that's 1,000 words that's strictly focused on split systems, or strictly focused on preventative maintenance for RTUs, or something along those lines. And then you create another blog post about something else, and you can or like another blog post would be about cooling towers or something like that. Like, there's so many ways on how you can do this, but that's one tactic, okay? Is that you're putting out content so that when people are going into Google, then they're typing in specific keywords, you've done your keyword research. You've like found like, hey, these words or this phrase tends to get a lot of traffic. And so when someone types in like what's called a long tail search term, so they type in like, how to do preventative maintenance for my cooling tower or something like that, then what you would go after like preventative maintenance cooling tower or cooling tower preventative maintenance plan, and you would have content about that. They would somehow bump into your content. They would see like, oh, interesting. Like, and so those folks are going to be more like, oh, wow, you have an entire plan on how to do this. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I've done that before. I've never heard of this. I should probably contact them and just have them actually implement it all for me. And then, or I can do part of it and they can do the other part, but you become the authority and the resource. And so it's all based off of like doing like very strategic keyword stuff. So like that's one piece of demand gen. Another piece of demand gen is like you basically doing like a podcast, for instance, where you're talking about facility management or you're talking about property management. And there are like a handful of facility and property management podcasts out there. And what they do is they're interviewing people in the industry, or they're giving their opinions about something, or they're talking about how things are shifting and how technology is starting to be more advanced in this, or how to use this type of, and you're essentially producing a podcast on a weekly basis, like on a regular basis, not when you have time, but like you are creating the demand. And so people find the podcast, and then what you do is you have like a strategy on how to distribute the podcast as well too. And maybe you distribute the podcast through, email, or you distribute the podcast on LinkedIn, or you distribute the podcast, through your network or something like that. And so you continue to produce content on there, and then what you do is that, people that listen to the podcast, they somehow access it, consume it. They're like, really cool, this is great. And then you send them somewhere to get more information. Maybe it's sending them to a website. Maybe it's to contact you via email. Whatever it is, you're capturing that demand as well too. Another way of creating demand gen or using a demand gen strategy is also doing like a social kind of approach, where you're using social media to distribute your content. And so you post on social media, not when you have time, but all the time, like every day, once a day, on LinkedIn, even on the weekends. And you're like, that's a lot of work, Javier. I know. And so what I'm getting to is that like demand generation is not like one of those like, if I just put one or two things out there, people will find me. No, you've got to create the demand. You've got to go out there, and it's essentially, the best way I can explain this is like you going door to door, knocking on doors, and passing out flyers. I remember doing this for my company. When I first started my martial arts and personal training studio, I would be going door to door and putting out flyers and trying to create demand, and people like, oh, I've heard of you, and that sort of stuff. Like, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of labor, it's a lot of elbow grease. And demand generation is kind of the same thing. But you're using digital technology to kind of help you leverage that. So I kind of covered 3 tactics that you can use. You can use like an SEO kind of approach, which is going to probably involve a little bit of content marketing. You can use a podcast, but you're going to have to find ways to distribute the content. You can use social media as a tactic, but then you want to think about like the content marketing piece as well too. You can use a combination of all 3. And so, and doing a demand gen very focused strategy for an entire quarter will be very time consuming. Like, you can literally just go with that and you can start seeing some results, I would say 6 to 12 months down the road. And so the biggest thing here is understanding that once your stuff starts kind of getting a little, like, it's like a flywheel effect. Once it starts generating a little momentum, you need to find ways to capture that demand as well too. Send them to a landing page, have them call sales, like something that is very like to the point. And then you got to train your sales team, be like, hey, how'd you hear us? So you want to do what we call in the marketing world, like is what's the term? It was on the tip of my tongue and I lost it. Is self. It's basically where you create your own attribution. You, instead of you using a CRM to say, hey, this came from organic, you trained a sales team to be like, hey, this person heard us from a podcast. They did a Google search. They went to our social media. They read a bunch of posts. We're just going to attribute this to podcast because that's how they entered our world. That's how they heard about us. And so that's something that you're going to want to train your sales team to do. All right, so the next strategy that you are going to want to use, and you can use regularly, is going to be lead gen. So lead generation. Lead gen is very specific and is very direct. This is literally going to be what we call paid acquisition. Any kind of channel that you use, okay, that you pay to run ads is going to be lead generation, okay? So if you use Google to run ads, then that's going to be a lead gen strategy. If you use Facebook or TikTok or LinkedIn to run ads, that's going to be a lead gen strategy. So what you're doing is you're running ads on these channels or platforms, and on those channels or platforms, then you send them to some sort of landing page. The ad's going to have like, some ad copy, some, an image, etc. Then you send them to a landing page. They read the landing page, they opt in, and then they essentially are now on your list. And so that's a strategy that works very, very well for a lot of businesses, okay? Like for us, we run a very heavy lead gen strategy. The best way I can explain this is that we're spending a significant amount of money per month, and now we're at the point of where we're generating over 5,500 leads per month at this moment. So last month, I think we generated 5,600 leads. This month, we're probably on pace at this current pace. We're probably on pace to either hitting or slightly exceeding those leads. And the channels that we focus on is Facebook and Google. So we spend about 75% of our budget towards Facebook and about 25% of our budget towards Google. Probably towards in the next 6 to 8 weeks, we will probably be moving 100% of our budget towards towards Facebook, and having, or maybe more like 90% of our budget towards Facebook and 10% towards Google. Because I don't want to completely abandon Google quite yet. And so where I'm coming from here is that we've really narrowed down how our audience finds us and who our ICP is and where that audience typically hangs out. So on a lead gen strategy, you really got to understand who your ideal customer profile is. Like, who is your target audience? And so you need to know this down to a T, all right? And then you can't tell me, and you can't say this either, that, well, our audience is not on Facebook. Well, they are, okay? Or our audience is not on TikTok. Well, you don't know that, all right? Don't dictate where your audience is based on the channel. Think of it the other way around. Think about okay, what channel is capturing the most attention for our audience? Where does our audience potentially hang out? Just because they're a professional doesn't mean that they have an outside life. Okay, because they do. They have a life that's outside of being a professional. So yes, they might have a LinkedIn profile, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're on another channel or two. Okay, and so you got to figure out for your audience, where do they hang out? Okay, as a facility management company, maybe your audience hangs out on LinkedIn, but I guarantee they're doing searches on Google. All right, where might be saying all right, I need a commercial HVAC technician or commercial HVAC company in Moab, Utah, just as an example. Or I need a commercial plumber in Hays, Kansas. And so you've got to think about where most of your customer probably come from, or what kind of terms are they typing in to kind of find you, and then you put those into ads that you're gonna be running on Google. And if you don't know how to do this, I've got some previous episodes that are all about how to set up ads correctly on Google. Or maybe you want to start looking at hiring an agency to do that for you. Where I'm coming from is that they are using other platforms to find services. Okay, they're not just kind of hey, Jack, I'm going to call you because what kind of services I need and what kind of expectations I have. Now, are they using those? Yes, they are. Is that all they use? Probably not. I remember talking to one FM where he was saying that, and he was proud of this. He spent a half a day to a full day of finding HVAC technicians on the Better Business. No, it wasn't the Better Business. It was Chamber of Commerce for a specific city. And he's and I started just digging down and then I found a list of 400, and I just started calling down the list, and he was proud of this. And I'm like, man, that is a glorious waste of time. Okay? I mean, don't get me wrong, he probably found what he needed. However, think of it the other way around. Imagine if you were running ads correctly based off of what these people might be searching for, and you pop up in that ad, and then you send them to a really compelling landing page. And in that landing page, it answers all their questions. All of a sudden, you become the authority. You become the person that knows on how to do X. And so that's kind of, my recommendation when you're doing lead gen is you're thinking about, search terms if you're going to be doing it on Google. On Facebook, it's going to be targeting, okay? And so you can't necessarily target facility managers, but there are other things that you can target. You could also input email addresses in there, okay? And you can run ads to those people. You can create lookalike audiences to those people as well too. There's a lot of ways on how this can be done, all right? And so just think about this, is that lead generation is going to be paid, are going to be paid channels, but there's a very strategic way how this is approached. And so our business tends to focus a lot on lead gen, all right? The next strategy that you're going to want to implement into your business is going to be nurturing. And so nurturing is very important, because what happens is that you don't want to capture all these leads, and then you don't, and you don't have something to like nurture them down the road. And so where I'm coming from here is that you can't expect every lead to convert, and you can't expect every lead to convert within a time period. Everyone is going to contact you when something breaks or something goes wrong. Okay, so, and if they experience this on numerous times, eventually they're gonna be like, all right, this is getting annoying. I remember I opted in for this, or I found this website. I see this email that comes out to me once a week. I'm going to contact them now. That's how nurturing works. And so it is not going to be printing you money on like all the time, but it keeps you front of mind all the time. And so we just recently, closed a new deal from one of our emails where we send out weekly emails once a week about, X. It could be about vehicle wraps, the value belt wraps, using different materials. There's so much to it. Where I'm coming from on all of this is that when you're sending nurture emails, it's kind of like you're dating. So like someone found you on a Google search, okay? They saw your ad and they saw a blog post as well too. They're like, oh, interesting. These guys are like all over the place. They click on that, they go to the page like, oh, wow. And they start digging in, they start reading a couple of blogs. Maybe they find a podcast that you might have hosted. They start doing a LinkedIn search about you to see who's also, oh, I'm connected to so-and-so. Oh, that's cool. I'm connected to Jack. And I've talked to Jack. I didn't know that Jack actually worked here before. And so they start, going into the rabbit hole and start reading Jack's posts and start reading that company's, posts and start kind of seeing who else Jack knows within that company. Like, I should reach out to Jack and see if we can create a meeting with so-and-so because I have a specific question about this. And then all of a sudden that meeting takes place, and then Jack, or sort of that person that was doing all this research, then goes to the landing page or calls sales. And then, they're like kind of interested, but they're not, they're about 6 months early, but they're not going to pull the trigger in anytime soon, but they're gathering information. And so you're going to start sending them nurture emails once a week to educate them, to let them know you're still there. And then they did all this research. They got all this content for you for 6 months, and then they buy. That's what nurture emails do. And you're like, that's a lot of work, Javier, to send all these emails. Like, I want them to buy quickly. Yeah, no kidding. We all do. But you have to understand that everyone buys on their own time. They either buy because there's a problem that they're trying to solve immediately, or they're buying whenever they're ready to actually make the decision down the road. They're gathering data. And the only way that they're going to buy is if you're front of mind. Okay? Because I've done this before numerous times where my purchasing decisions are the person that was you contact me at the right time. I've been looking for this. And it could have, but the other part too is that the person that's always educating me the most, I always refer back to them. So if you're that person, you become that leader, you become that authority, you become that person that understands the space, that understands the content, you do very well there. All right, so nurturing is a very, that right there can be run in conjunction with like lead gen. Nurturing can be run in conjunction with demand gen. And some people would even argue that nurturing lives underneath demand gen. And it could. It totally could. But here's the thing. It is a different strategy. Okay? What you're doing is you're sharing what knowledge. You're sharing, maybe a blog post. You're sharing maybe, a tip or a trick on how to clean, or how to hire, or whatever that is, do like some information that these FMs might be interested in. So do you see what I'm saying? Like, nurturing is very different. So you're not always pitching, you're not always selling. You're literally just dating this person for a long time. Okay? And then the last strategy that I have here is going to be ABM. ABM stands for account-based marketing. And ABM is going to be going after very targeted lists. Okay, so let's say that you're going after like the, example, like the top 100 facilities, okay, or businesses, or the top 100 facility managers, or the top, 150, property managers, like something like that. And it's very targeted. So you find a business, and then you find all the people that are decision makers of that business for like your ideal customer profile. So example would be like, hey, you're going after Walmart. And then Walmart has, let's say, 20 facility managers. They probably have more, but I'm just going to use 20. And those 20 facility managers all report to a director of facilities. And there's, 5 director facilities, okay? And so those director facilities, then all those 5 director of facilities report to a VP of facilities. So there's a VP of facilities, 5 director facilities, and then 20 facility managers. Then what you'll do is that you'll be like, okay, cool. This is the hierarchy for Walmart. What is it like that for Target, for Macy's, for Barnes and Noble? And you start figuring out what those targeted accounts are and the hierarchy of that. And then you start working your way up. So maybe you start reaching out to all the facility managers and you connect with them on LinkedIn. And you start posting content about facility management and some HVAC tips and some plumbing tips and some electrical tips and stuff like that. And then you start connecting with the director of facilities and you continue to post your content. And then you start connecting to the VP of facilities and you continue to post your content. And as you're posting your content, you maybe have a podcast that you also have. And that podcast is interviewing VPs and directors about facilities, and you're talking strategies and tactics and operational stuff, and you're getting all, crazy about that. And you share that on a weekly basis. And so then once you've connected with these different people, these different accounts, okay, and this can be like over the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, it doesn't matter. But you're doing this on a regular basis, okay? And so as you're doing this, okay, you're connecting, you're posting really valuable content. These people are starting to see it. You are now beginning to engage with their content. So do they post regularly? Comment on it. Somehow on LinkedIn, you can set up where there's a bell that notifies you when these people comment or post. And then you can then start kind of like contributing into their world. And then you have some sort of outreach campaign where you DM them or you send them an email or you give them a call and you just kind of start, saying, hey, I just wanted to, take a moment to introduce myself. I understand you may not be looking for any kind of, an IFM kind of company, but want to know that, if there's any kind of things that change or if you need some support in these areas, this is where we specialize in this region. We have it down packed perfect. Let me know and I'm happy to help. Okay, so you have some sort of outreach strategy. And so your team will then start working these accounts accordingly. And maybe you mail them something once a month or once a quarter. Maybe you send them an email and you phone call them every other month to just kind of check up on them. And so this account-based marketing is very strategic. It's a one-to-few approach. It's not like a one-to-many like running lead gen or demand gen or nurturing. It's a one-to-few or one-to-one. And so ABM is gonna probably return the best bang for your buck because this is where you can get like huge accounts, but you work them for a while. And then you have to work together with the sales team, with the AE team or whomever to work these accounts accordingly. This is not just like straight cold calls, just going crazy kind of stuff. This is strategic, very strategic approach on how you communicate with these people. When you do this, ABM can make you a ton of money. I got a contact, a colleague that I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and I want to say that they've implemented ABM and for their company and their marketing agency, and he said that they've generated about $500,000 in new revenue just by using an ABM approach. They do webinars, and they invite these people to these webinars that they're targeting accounts, very specific. They're not doing these giant ones where they're trying to get hundreds and hundreds of people to show up. It's like, hey, we had a webinar. We had 10 people show up. Of the 10 people, 10 of them were our targeted accounts. Of those 10 people that actually showed up, 3 of them set up a follow-up appointment. Of those 3 people that have a follow-up appointment, we closed 1 and 2 of them are in the works. You see what I'm saying? It's very strategic. Okay? All of these, and you might be telling yourself like, well, I want to do all of this. Like, we need to do everything. We need to be everywhere. You can't. You don't have enough time. I mean, if you don't even have a marketing leader, implementing all this stuff is going to be damn near impossible. Okay? A smart marketing leader is going to take 1, 2, maybe 3, maybe all 4. But then they're going to have limits. Be like, hey, if we do ABM, this is all we're doing for this piece. Like, we only do one tactic, and that's it. If we're doing lead gen, it's going to take us 3 months to deploy this correctly. If we're doing demand gen, it's going to take us 6 months to actually make this thing work. Okay, and we're going to be tracking it by this. These are the KPIs that we're going to be measuring the success out of this. So where I'm coming from is that these are all very strategic marketing strategies that will grow your business. Like, we do all this. I will tell you right now that ABM, we're not launching it to its fullest effect. All right, we're falling very short on this. And why? Because I don't have enough time. We have so much stuff on our plate right now. I get pulled in so many different directions that sometimes ABM gets pushed off to the wayside. And it's not that we don't want to do it. We know the value of it. It's just, it's resources. And I'm at the point now where I have to start putting an hour in my calendar per day to just focus on ABM. So 5 hours a week, because otherwise that will give me the best fighting chance to actually make this thing, what it should be and what it could be. So those are it. Those are the 4, okay? Of these 4, which one gives you the best bang for your buck? It all depends. Like ABM, a lot of work, you get big accounts. Demand gen, you become the authority. Lead gen, you literally are spreading everything like shotgun approach, but you can get very targeted as well too. Nurturing, this should almost be you should just be doing this, period. All right, so let me know what you guys think about this. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode of going over these 4 marketing strategies. I do use these all in some sort of capacity. Some of them are in autopilot. Some of them are still being built out. But at the end of the day, lead gen, autopilot for the most part, 80%. Nurturing, I would say it's on autopilot, but we still have to do, content's already created. It's just like creating the emails. That we have to design them and all that stuff. It's a lot of work. Demand gen, this is on semi autopilot. ABM, lots of work. That's us. All right. So anyways, I'm gonna hop off. I'm gonna launch another episode, but let me know what everyone thought about this episode. 3 things I always ask at the end of my episodes. Number 1, please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me on linkedin.com/in/Javier Lozano Jr. Rate this podcast on either Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. I would really appreciate if you can give me a 5-star review on this, because I'm trying to grow this podcast. I want people to actually learn more about it. And then number 3, share this podcast with somebody else. So if you found this episode very valuable, please share it to someone else, because I think they would probably enjoy it as well too. Thanks a lot and have a great day.